My name is Audrey Sloan. I was 33 years old when a nurse at St. Gabriel Regional turned a security monitor toward my hospital bed and showed me 7 images that made my broken spine feel like the smaller injury. It was my 7th night in the hospital. Metal stabilized 3 vertebrae in my lower back. My left leg still answered me slowly, as though every message had to cross a damaged wire. My parents had left while I was in surgery and driven to San Diego for my younger brother Nolan's launch party, an event I had funded. Since then, neither they nor Nolan had visited me or called me directly. Dana Ortiz, the night charge nurse, stood beside the monitor with one hand resting on its frame. Security needs to know whether you recognize this woman. The first image was stamped 1:46 a.m., the night after my operation. A woman in a dark coat stood at the lobby desk holding a paper bag. Dana clicked again. Second night, 2:11. The same woman, another bag. Third night, 12:58. Fourth, 1:32. Fifth, 2:06. Sixth, 1:19. She asked about me, I said. She asked whether we could accept something for you. We gave her no medical information, and she wasn't authorized to come upstairs. What did she leave? Small things. Socks. Lip balm. A puzzle book. Security held them because nobody could verify her. Dana opened the 7th image. The woman had turned toward the camera. Light from the lobby caught the left side of her face, and something inside me went perfectly still. I knew that face. Not from my childhood memories. Those were mostly fragments. Citrus hand lotion, blue paper, a birthday candle bending in warm frosting. I knew her from one photograph my grandmother had kept hidden in a recipe book. In it, 6-year-old me sat behind a cake while this woman knelt beside my chair, her hand hovering near my shoulder as though she was afraid I might disappear. My father had spent 25 years teaching me that she was the one who had disappeared. So why had she come to my hospital every night while the family who raised me stayed in San Diego? Before I tell you what her face uncovered, join this community, subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and like the video today. Stories like mine become easier to dismiss when people suffer quietly. Here, we pay attention to the choices families make when someone can no longer be useful to them, and to the evidence that survives after every excuse is gone. To understand why I was alone in that bed, I need to take you back 6 weeks, to the evening my family asked me to risk the one thing I had saved entirely for myself. We were at my father Peter's dining table in Riverside. Claire, my stepmother, had just cleared the plates when Nolan placed a thin black folder in front of me. "Waymark is ready," he said. "The pilot customers are confirmed. The San Diego launch is the last step before the funding round." Nolan was 28 and could make uncertainty sound like a door he had already opened. Waymark Systems was his logistics platform, but for months its contracts, vendor obligations, and launch budget had lived on my laptop after work. I was a senior contract risk manager for a health technology distributor. In my family, that meant I was the person everyone called when enthusiasm met a document nobody wanted to read. Dad leaned back at the head of the table. "Your brother has built something important." I opened the folder. The amount on the first page was $86,000. "This isn't a favor," I said. "This is my house deposit." Claire sat beside me and touched my wrist. "Nobody is pretending it isn't a lot." The account held almost everything I had saved over 9 years. Promotions, canceled trips, a car I kept long after the air conditioning failed. It was supposed to become a small home where nobody could tell me I occupied more space than I had earned. Nolan turned the folder toward himself. 18 months, interest, full information rights, exactly the terms you asked for. I had asked for a signed promissory note because I knew better than to let family affection replace paper. Yet I had already donated hundreds of hours that no agreement recorded. When a vendor missed a deadline, Nolan called me. When Dad worried about cash flow, he asked me to translate it. When Claire sensed an argument, she reminded everyone that I was the calm one. Nolan was the family promise. I was the structure underneath it. That system did not feel cruel from inside it. Claire had packed my school lunches, sat through conferences, and stayed beside me through fevers. Dad had been the parent who remained after my biological mother vanished. Nolan had slept on my bedroom floor during thunderstorms. I truly loved them. That was why I kept translating affection into work, and why each request arrived wrapped in history. Refusing the loan would not have felt like protecting money. It would have felt like accusing the people who raised me of loving what I provided more than they loved me. Dad smiled at me. "You've always been the strong one, Audrey." He meant it as praise. I received it as an assignment. I read every page. The note required Waymark to disclose the debt to future investors and repay me within 18 months. I corrected 2 dates, made Nolan initial both changes, and signed my name beneath his. 6 weeks later, the money had paid for the waterfront hotel, launch vendors, and the commercial pilot presentation. My savings account showed a number small enough to frighten me, but my family spoke about San Diego as if all of us had contributed equally. The morning of the launch, my phone rang before dawn. Nolan's name glowed above the time, 4:38 a.m. "Please tell me you're awake," he said when I answered. I was now. The backup demonstration equipment was still with me in Riverside after I had checked it the previous night. Nolan needed it in San Diego before the doors opened. "I'll bring it," I said. There was a pause, then his relieved breath. "I knew I could count on you." At 5:12, I carried the hard black case down to my car. My building was silent. The sky had only begun to pale over the parking lot. I secured the case in my trunk, lowered myself behind the wheel, and started the engine. At 5:27, I was southbound with the heater blowing against my hands and Nolan's equipment riding behind me like one more obligation I had managed before breakfast. Traffic was light. The sky over the freeway had turned from black to charcoal, and I remember thinking I might reach San Diego early enough to inspect the setup he swore was finished. I had coffee cooling in the cup holder and Nolan's checklist open on the passenger seat. At a red light, he texted a photograph of the hotel ballroom with "ready" in capital letters. I did not point out that a launch was not ready if its founder still needed his sister to drive 90 miles with essential equipment. I sent a thumbs up and put the phone face down before moving again. That tiny reflex contained our whole arrangement. Notice the risk, solve the risk, protect Nolan from the embarrassment of naming the risk. I believed I was choosing generosity. I did not yet understand how rarely a choice remains voluntary when everyone has organized their plans around your inability to say no. At approximately 5:30, headlights moved across the median at an angle headlights should never take. The other car crossed into my lane. I braked. The hard case struck the inside of my trunk, then metal folded, glass burst, and the road seemed to lift beneath me. My next memory was not an image, it was pressure inside my chest and a voice telling me not to move. I tried to answer that I understood, but the word came out wet and small. When someone touched my left boot, I knew a hand was there only because I saw it. The crash report later established what I could not. The other driver had suffered an acute medical impairment, crossed the barrier opening, and hit me nearly head-on. I was sober, belted, and in my lane. Nothing about the collision was Nolan's plan, my father's punishment, or fate making a point. It was an independent catastrophe that happened to expose choices already waiting inside my family. At St. Gabriel, scans showed an unstable burst fracture at L1. Bone had narrowed the spinal canal. I also had fractured ribs, a concussion, and incomplete nerve involvement affecting my left leg. The neurosurgical team recommended urgent decompression and stabilization from T12 through L2. Urgent did not mean they knew I would never walk. It meant delay increased the risk that the function I still had could disappear. I know what happened while I was unconscious because I later read the consent record, nursing notes, and message timestamps, then asked each person the same narrow questions. Peter and Claire reached the hospital before I entered the operating room. The surgeon explained that my spine was unstable, that the canal was compromised, and that no one could promise what my left leg would recover. A nurse documented Claire asking whether the operation could last past noon. Dad asked whether both of them needed to stay in the building. They were told there was nothing they could do inside the operating room. They were not told my surgery was routine. They were not told the danger had passed. At 8:14, after I had been taken through the secured doors, Dad texted Nolan, "She's in surgery. Serious, but doctors have her." "We are coming down," Nolan replied. "Is she stable?" Dad wrote, "Stable enough for them to operate." That sentence became permission because all three of them needed it to. Peter and Claire left St. Gabriel's garage at 8:31 and drove towards San Diego. Nolan did not ask to speak with a doctor or pause the launch. He told his operations lead that the family had a medical situation, but the program would proceed. I woke in the ICU late that afternoon with a tube at my nose, an incision burning beneath me, and Dana asking me to squeeze her fingers. "You're at St. Gabriel," she said. "You had spinal surgery. Can you tell me your name?" I did. Then I asked where my father was. Dana checked the board, then my chart. Her face did not change. "He isn't listed as present right now." "Claire? No one is in the waiting area for you." I tried to raise my head. Pain drove a white line through my back and ribs. "Don't bargain with the bed yet," Dana said. "The surgeon is coming. Your job is to stay still." The surgeon explained that the pressure had been relieved and the hardware was holding. My right foot followed commands. My left toes moved late and barely. Recovery could improve over months, he said, but the first week would tell them more. He refused both promises I wanted, that I would walk normally and that I would be allowed to solve recovery alone. I asked for my phone. It had been sealed with my damaged belongings. When Dana brought it, the screen held messages from coworkers, cousins, and people I had not seen since college. There was no missed call from Peter, Claire, or Nolan. There was, however, a Waymark post already being shared beneath photographs of the waterfront stage. Waymark's family backer and informal finance lead, Audrey Sloan, was recovering at St. Gabriel Regional after an accident, it said. Audrey wanted the launch to continue and was cheering the team from afar. I had not been conscious to want anything. My money had paid for the room in those photographs. My body had been broken carrying their backup plan. Now my silence had been converted into a testimonial. I told myself the launch would end by evening. Then they would call. On the first night, expectation gave me something to count, besides medication intervals. I watched 7 o'clock become 9, then midnight. Every time footsteps slowed outside the ICU, I prepared my face for family. No one came. Pain wrapped around my ribs whenever I breathed too deeply. My left leg lay under the blanket with the disturbing weight of an object somebody had placed beside me. Dana checked sensation with a soft touch and asked whether I felt pressure, temperature, location. Sometimes I was right, sometimes I guessed. Improvement can be uneven, she told me. Do not turn one bad hour into a prognosis. I'm not worried. She looked at the untouched second chair. I didn't ask whether you were worried. At 1:46 after midnight, an unidentified woman arrived in the public lobby with a paper bag. I did not learn that then. Security logged it, declined to disclose anything about me, and held the delivery because the visitor was not authorized. On day 2, I was moved to surgical step-down. A patient care assistant helped wash my face while I stared at the ceiling and apologized each time she reached across me. Physical therapy raised the head of my bed, then helped me sit. The room tilted. Sweat soaked my gown. My left knee buckled before it ever touched the floor. My phone stayed close enough to see. Dad sent one message through a family group thread. Doctors say she's recovering. Big day here. Nolan sent a heart beneath it. Claire posted a photograph of the launch flowers. None of them called me. Dana, working another night, told me security had a package addressed to Audrey, but no verified sender. Inside, according to the delivery inventory, were non-slip socks and unscented lip balm. "Can I see the note?" I asked. "Not until security clears the visitor," she said. Repeated unknown deliveries are handled carefully. I said it was probably from a vendor. Even in a hospital bed, I tried to make unexplained care impersonal. Day 3 brought a walker and the first transfer to a chair. 2 therapists and a gait belt did what I had once done without thought. My right leg took weight. My left trembled and dragged half a step. I stood for 11 seconds. Afterward, I cried from exhaustion, then told the therapist my eyes were watering from pain medication. That afternoon, a colleague sent me a short video from Waymark's account. Nolan stood beneath blue lights while Peter toasted his courage, and Claire applauded beside the stage. The caption called the launch a family achievement. I watched only once. The important fact was not that they smiled while I hurt. People can smile inside terrible days. It was that the program had ended, the guests had left, and their absence continued. On day 4, I reached the bathroom with the walker and 2 people guarding me. I also learned that the unidentified woman had returned on each previous night. She never claimed an emergency. She asked whether staff could accept a small item, left when they refused information, and wrote her contact details on visitor cards that security retained. The third delivery was a large print puzzle book. The fourth was a packet of hair ties and a soft sleep mask. Nothing expensive. Nothing intimate enough to prove she knew me. Just objects selected by someone who understood that hospital nights were long. Peter sent another group message saying the family would stay in San Diego for investor follow-up. Claire added, "We love you, strong girl." It was addressed to the group, not to me. Nolan's assistant emailed a request for access to a vendor file on my work laptop. I did not answer either message. By day 5, discharge planning had entered every conversation. I could not bend, twist, lift, climb my apartment stairs safely, shower without equipment, or get myself to therapy. The case manager asked who could provide reliable daily support. "I manage well alone," I said. "That isn't a person," she replied. I named coworkers who had offered grocery deliveries. She asked who could help me transfer at 2 in the morning if my leg failed. I had no answer. The 5th visitor delivery was a phone charger with a long cord. The 6th was a pair of plain cotton socks. Security logged both. The woman received no update and made no attempt to pass the desk. On day 6, I left Peter a voicemail. "I need to know the discharge plan. Please call me." I kept it practical, because practical was the language in which my needs had historically been allowed. He replied by text 4 hours later. "Packed schedule. We will coordinate soon. You're the strong one." Nolan sent nothing. Claire reacted to Dad's message with a heart. The phrase no longer sounded like praise. It sounded like a locked door with my name on it. That evening, Dana said security wanted to resolve the visitor question before another delivery arrived. The 7th night was approaching. My family had turned silence into a plan, and a stranger had turned waiting into a pattern. "If she comes again," I said, "I want to know who she is." Day 7 began with the rehabilitation physician asking whether my family could attend a discharge conference by phone. I called Peter while she sat beside the bed. The call rang until voicemail. I tried Claire, then Nolan. 3 unanswered calls were finally clearer than the messages I had spent a week translating on their behalf. The hospital log helped remove my last excuse. Peter had called the unit twice for brief condition updates, while his authorization remained active, but he had never asked staff to connect him to my room. Claire had spoken with a case coordinator and promised that the family was arranging help, then supplied no name or date. Nolan had made no contact at all. They had not been unable to find me. They had maintained enough access to manage what other people knew, while avoiding the one conversation in which I could describe what their decision had cost. That discovery was more humiliating than simple absence. They had remained close enough to curate my condition for others, yet far enough away to avoid hearing me name my fear. I told the physician, "Plan as if none of them are available." It was the first honest instruction I had given about my family. She recommended inpatient rehabilitation until I could transfer more safely and manage basic care with less assistance. My insurer needed documentation, my apartment needed evaluation, and I needed an emergency contact who would answer. The list frightened me because every item proved that determination was not a substitute for support. Dana came after dark with the security supervisor's approval recorded in my chart. She explained the limits before touching the monitor. "These are lobby images for identification," she said. "They aren't being released to you. The visitor was not told your condition, room, treatment, or whether you were awake. We need to know whether you recognize her and whether contact would be safe. And if I don't? Security will tell her not to return and will retain the record under policy." If I do? You decide whether anyone contacts her. Recognition is not authorization. That distinction mattered, although I did not yet know how much. Dana could care for me without claiming the right to choose for me. The woman downstairs could return without demanding that a locked door open. Both behaviors were so unfamiliar that I first experienced them as procedure rather than kindness. Dana positioned the screen where I could see without twisting. I braced one hand against the mattress while she opened security's sequence. Dana closed the 7th image and set a clear evidence sleeve on my tray. Inside it was a visitor card written in compact blue ink, Marisol Reyes, a phone number. Beneath it, I am Audrey's biological mother. Please tell her only that I came. Contact must be her choice. For most of my life, Marisol's name had functioned like the label on a hazardous container. Dad used it only when warning me what addiction did to families. Claire went quiet whenever I asked a question. At 18, I had stopped asking because adulthood seemed to require gratitude toward the people who stayed. I opened the photograph from a protected folder on my phone. My grandmother had given it to me before she died, with no story attached. The woman in the old picture and the visitor in the lobby shared the same left eyebrow, the same uneven line at the corner of the mouth. Age had changed her. The name on the card connected the images. Neither resemblance nor handwriting told me why she had come, and neither proved that my father had lied. "Do you have the dates?" I asked. Dana showed me the delivery log without handing over the security images. 7 entries. 7 nights, each arrival after midnight, each departure minutes later. Staff notes repeated the same limits: no medical information disclosed, no access granted, card retained. I read the entries twice because evidence was the one language I trusted when feeling became dangerous. Why didn't she come during the day? She told the desk she works afternoon and evening hours. That's all I can tell you from the visitor record. I imagined calling Peter. Then I imagined hearing his certainty before I had gathered a single fact of my own. What contact can I authorize? Dana gave me options. Security could call the number and arrange a supervised visit in a family consultation room when I was medically cleared to leave the unit briefly. I could allow a phone call first. I could accept the deliveries without contact. I could do nothing. A phone call, I said. Tomorrow morning. Dana present at the start. No medical information. If she asks to come upstairs, the answer is no. Dana wrote each condition down and read it back to me. My hand shook when I signed the authorization, but I signed it. I was not welcoming a mother. I was permitting a question to enter the room. At 10 the next morning, Dana placed the call on speaker, confirmed my authorization, and said, "Ms. Reyes, Audrey is choosing to speak with you. She may end the call at any time." There was a breath on the line. Then a woman said, "Thank you for telling me the rules." Her voice did not unlock a memory. I was grateful for that. Recognition would have felt like an order. "Why are you here?" I asked. "Because I learned you were hurt, and because I thought you might be alone." "Who told you?" "No one. I saw Waymark's public post." She explained that she had followed the company account for years. Family photographs appeared there occasionally. Nolan receiving an award, Peter at a trade event, Claire beside a holiday table. Once or twice I stood at an edge of the frame. Marisol treated those glimpses as the distance she believed I wanted. "The post named St. Gabriel," she said. "It said you wanted the launch to continue. I came here. The desk would not tell me if you were admitted, and they were right not to." The post had now committed 2 betrayals. It had borrowed my consent, and it had exposed my hospital to protect Waymark's reputation. By accident, the lie had opened a path to the person my family had spent years keeping outside. "Before you decide whether we ever speak again," Marisol said, "I need to tell you what I did, not only what Peter did." Dana stepped out after I nodded that I wanted to continue. Marisol told me that when I was 6, a work injury became a prescription, then dependence, then a house in which adults could no longer pretend I was safe. She entered residential treatment after Peter sought emergency custody. She missed 2 supervised visits early in treatment. The first time she was ill. The second time she panicked because she believed I would see what she had become. "Those reasons did not make the empty chair less empty for you," she said. She never turned Peter into a monster to make herself easier to forgive. She said he had been frightened, exhausted, and right to remove me from immediate danger. Her accusation began only where his emergency became a permanent story, and my right to know was treated as another hazard he could control. She completed treatment and remained in recovery, but Peter obtained sole physical custody. He moved us within California. Marisol had residual rights and support obligations. She paid support when the court ordered it and tried through counsel, certified mail, and birthday letters to reopen contact. "Did he stop you?" "He blocked things he should not have blocked. But I also stopped pushing when I should have pushed harder. I was ashamed. I had little money after treatment. Peter said you were frightened of me and doing well. Sometimes I accepted that because fighting him felt like risking you. Sometimes I accepted it because retreat was easier than discovering you truly did not want me. She did not ask me to call that love. She did not ask me to call her mom. What do you want now? For you to know I did not choose 25 years of silence. After that, whatever access exists belongs to you. My pain medication was beginning to dull the edges of the room. I told her I would not decide history on a phone call. You shouldn't, she said. I brought copies, treatment completion, court filings, support records, certified receipts. Security has the sealed folder. You can refuse it. I accepted the folder under the same inventory procedure as the gifts. Dana and I reviewed only enough to label what was inside. I did not have the stamina for a trial that morning, and Marisol did not use my fatigue to force closeness. She said goodbye when I asked. Over the next 2 days, I examined the papers in short intervals between therapy, medication, and sleep. The treatment record confirmed a long residential admission and successful completion. The custody file confirmed Peter's emergency petition, Marisol's 2 missed visits, and the later support order. Bank and court records showed years of payments. The evidence did not turn her early failure into innocence. It placed an ending after it that I had never been allowed to see. The certified mail receipts were harder. They carried addresses where I had lived, dates that matched birthdays, and signatures from adults in our household. Several envelopes had been returned. Most were pale blue. I opened the earliest one with Dana nearby. Inside, Marisol had written to a 9-year-old child about a library book and a blue bicycle I barely remembered. She did not attack Dad. She wrote that she was sober, that she loved me, and that she would wait until contact felt safe. There were gaps. There were years with only one letter. There was no heroic legal campaign. The record showed effort limited by shame, poverty, and fear. It also showed that the story, "She never tried," could not survive contact with paper. One item was different, delivery proof for a letter addressed directly to me shortly after my 18th birthday. The signature belonged to Claire. I searched my memory for a blue envelope that year and found only the party Claire had organized, the cake Nolan dropped, and Dad raising a toast to the woman who had chosen to be Audrey's real mother. The room seemed to narrow around my bed. I did not send an accusation. I sent Peter one question. On the week of my 18th birthday, did a letter from Marisol Reyes arrive at the house, addressed directly to me? His typing indicator appeared, vanished, then returned. He did not answer. Claire called twice. I let both calls ring. 40 minutes later, Dad texted, "We are driving back. Do not let that woman confuse you before we explain." They had not driven back when my surgeon could not promise I would walk. They came when one precise question threatened their ownership of the past. Peter and Claire arrived after sunset carrying flowers from the Launch Hotel and the expectation that parenthood would open any door. It did not. Dana asked me from inside the room whether I wanted them admitted. I said they could enter for 15 minutes, together, with no access to my chart and no discussion with my physicians. She placed 2 chairs near the foot of my bed, rather than beside it. Claire cried when she saw the brace and walker. Dad looked at the equipment as though it were an unfair embellishment to a story he had already simplified. "We came as soon as we understood what was happening," he said. "You understood the surgery was urgent before you left. We understood you were in expert hands. Nolan had employees, investors, contracts. Did the letter arrive?" His mouth tightened. "Marisol is using your condition to rewrite history. The question has a yes or no answer." He admitted that a direct letter had arrived. He said Marisol's addiction had made our home unsafe, which was true. He said he had protected me through emergency custody, which had initially been defensible. Then he moved without pausing into the claim that every later choice inherited that justification. "She missed visits," he said. "She disappeared whenever responsibility became hard. By the time she sent letters, you were stable. I would not let her disturb that. You told me she sent none. I told you the version a child could live with." I was 18 when that letter came. Legally 18, emotionally vulnerable to exactly this. The records could establish dates, money, attempts, and concealment. They could not establish the hour when his fear became entitlement. Listening to him, I understood that he did not believe the distinction mattered. I asked Dana to have him leave. He stood slowly. "After everything I did, this is cruel," he said. "Everything you did is why the truth matters." Claire remained only because I asked her to. For a minute, she arranged the hotel flowers in their paper, smoothing already smooth edges. That was how she had handled conflict all my life, improving its appearance until everybody tired of naming it. "I loved raising you," she said. "I know." The answer startled her. I remembered lunches labeled in her neat handwriting, fever cloths, school concerts, the night she drove across Riverside because my first apartment alarm was chirping. Those acts were real. "So was the signature on the delivery proof. Did you intercept my letter?" Claire stared at her hands. "Yes." No explanation arrived before the word, and for that 1 second I heard what accountability could sound like. Then fear returned. She said I had just started college. She said Peter believed contact would destabilize me. She said she had spent 10 years becoming my mother, and the envelope felt like someone could erase her with a stamp. "So you erased my choice. I was afraid of losing you. You lost access to me by deciding fear gave you access to my mail." Claire wept quietly. I did not comfort her. I also did not tell her our entire life had been false. Love did not excuse concealment, and concealment did not need to erase every fever she had sat through for the betrayal to count. Nolan came the next afternoon. Unlike Dad, he stopped at the door until Dana received my answer. He looked smaller without stage lighting. "The financing calls are a disaster," he said after sitting down. "Hello to you too." He closed his eyes. "I'm sorry. I don't know how to do this. Start with the returned letters." His face changed before he spoke. 2 years earlier, while looking for insurance documents in Dad's office, he had found a packet of blue envelopes marked returned or undeliverable. He took a photograph because the dates bothered him. Then Peter told him Marisol had been dangerous and that I did not know because knowing would hurt me. "You were 31, I said. "I wasn't a child you had to protect. I told myself it wasn't my story to interfere with. It benefited you not to interfere." He sent me the photograph. Its metadata was dated 2 years earlier. The packet on Dad's desk matched envelopes in Marisol's records. I asked what he knew on launch morning. Nolan admitted Dad had said my spinal surgery was urgent. He had avoided calling because he feared hearing something that would force him to cancel. His communications director drafted the post. Nolan approved it, including the statement that I wanted the event to continue. "I thought you'd understand," he said. That was the family rule reduced to 4 words. I made decisions one at a time because speeches could be debated and instructions could be followed. I removed Peter and Claire from medical information access and named a trusted colleague as emergency contact. I accepted inpatient rehabilitation instead of a discharge plan dependent on family promises. I instructed Nolan in writing to remove the unauthorized post and publish a correction stating that I had not approved continuation, that I was Waymark's lender, and that my company work had been unpaid. I ended that work immediately. Through counsel provided by my employee benefit plan, I gave formal notice preserving every right under the existing promissory note. I did not demand impossible immediate repayment. I required accurate disclosure, scheduled information, and performance under the agreement all of us had signed. Finally, I gave Nolan the tow yard information for the equipment case recovered from my trunk. "Can you release it to Dad?" he asked. "Send a courier with company authorization." It was a minor instruction. It felt enormous. The case belonged to Waymark. Getting it back no longer belonged to me. Peter called my boundaries punishment. Nolan said disclosure could shrink the round. Claire asked whether one terrible week had canceled 25 years. I did not answer them together. They had made different choices for different reasons, and they would receive different consequences. By the time I transferred to rehabilitation, my body, name, money, and medical information were no longer shared family property. Inpatient rehabilitation taught me how many ordinary movements are actually agreements between muscle, nerve, balance, and trust. I practiced rolling without twisting, dressing with tools, transferring into a shower chair, and taking slow steps inside parallel bars. Some mornings my left foot cleared the floor. Some afternoons it dragged after 3 passes. When therapists helped me, I thanked them instead of apologizing. That change was less visible than walking and almost as difficult. I also let a trusted colleague become my emergency contact without promising to repay her in favors. She attended one discharge lesson, labeled my medications, and left after I said I needed quiet. The friendship survived my need without becoming a ledger, another small piece of evidence against the rules I had mistaken for universal. Marisol visited only on the days I approved. She brought no more surprise packages. When I asked, she drove me to one outpatient consultation after discharge and waited outside the exam room. She never called herself my mother to staff. She never posted about Peter or used my injury as evidence that she had been the better parent. We spoke first about records, then about small memories. She remembered the blue bicycle. I remembered citrus lotion. Neither of us pretended fragments could replace 25 years. Pressure arrived from the other side with better stationery. Waymark's attorney explained that listing my note prominently could delay the round. Nolan called it a technical issue and asked whether I could waive information rights for 90 days. Peter sent messages saying employees would lose jobs because I had confused family pain with business. Claire wrote that everyone had failed and begged me not to make permanent decisions while medicated. It was the old system adapting its vocabulary without changing its request. Audrey, carry the cost quietly. Then my leg gave way during a stair exercise. The therapist caught the gait belt, but pain flared down my back, and I lost 2 days of progress to imaging and rest. That night I opened Nolan's draft waiver. If I signed, his financing might close faster. Dad might stop calling me vindictive. Claire might tell relatives I was still myself. For 20 minutes, I began composing an email that would restore almost everything. Marisol called at the time I had authorized. I told her I was tired, not what I was considering. "Then we can hang up," she said. "You don't owe me a productive conversation." Afterward, I looked at the unsigned waiver and understood why the sentence had reached me. Help that respected exhaustion did not demand a return. The family arrangement had always sent an invoice. The next morning, I asked independent counsel and Waymark's outside accountant for written confirmation. Both answered the same way. The note remained valid, disclosure was required, and delaying it while soliciting investors created more risk, not less. I rejected the waiver. Nolan was angry for 3 weeks. Then he removed the launch post. Waymark published a correction stating that I had been unable to authorize continuation, that my $86,000 was debt rather than informal family capital, and that I was not an employee or current advisor. Nolan sent the same correction to investors and staff. The larger financing proposal disappeared. Waymark accepted a smaller round, postponed 2 hires, and reduced expansion. It did not collapse. Once Nolan stopped presenting reality as sabotage, his company proved capable of surviving it. Structured payments began the following month. My relationships changed less cleanly. Peter agreed to mediation only if the mediator acknowledged that all concealment had been necessary. I declined that condition. He kept sending explanations, and I kept the door closed. Claire's first letters mixed apology with defense. I returned them through the mediator. Months later, she wrote 1 page without but. She stated that she had intercepted mail addressed to an adult Audrey because she feared losing her place. She did not blame Marisol, Peter, or me. After she respected another 3 months of silence, I allowed a 20-minute mediated call. Nolan stopped asking me to fix Waymark documents. Our contact narrowed to payment confirmations and occasionally ordinary sibling messages. Once he texted a photograph of a thunderstorm and wrote, "Still hate these." I answered, "Floors are available. Business advice isn't." He wrote, "Fair." I returned to modified work first from home, then 2 days a week in an accessible office. Solving other people's contract problems still satisfied me. Doing it for pay, within hours, and without confusing competence with love, satisfied me more. I read the blue envelopes slowly, 1 or 2 a month. Some made me angry at Peter. Some made me angry at Marisol for retreating. Some contained nothing more dramatic than a birthday wish. They were evidence of attempted presence, not a replacement childhood. By the time my cane became optional for ordinary indoor distances, Waymark's final payments were scheduled, and I had begun looking again at small homes. This time the house was not a reward for never needing anyone. It was a place where I could decide who entered. 14 months after the collision, Nolan transferred the final payment. The remainder of the $86,000 principal, plus the modest interest specified in our note. I checked the calculation once, saved the statement, and closed the spreadsheet. Waymark was smaller than the company pictured at the waterfront launch. It served fewer regions, hired more slowly, and disclosed its obligations accurately. It was also viable. Nolan had learned that surviving honest limits was different from being rescued from them. I never resumed unpaid work. When he asked whether we could have dinner without discussing cash flow, I said yes. We met in public, stayed 40 minutes, and spoke about a terrible movie. Cautious contact was not the sibling closeness we once imagined. It was more truthful than closeness, financed by my silence. The repayment restored enough of my savings for a down payment on a modest one-story home. It had a level entrance, wide bathroom clearance, and a kitchen counter where I could sit on difficult mornings. I returned to modified work full-time. I walked ordinary distances independently, although fatigue could still pull at my left foot and uneven ground still earned the cane. The house did not prove I needed nobody. Its ramps and clearances admitted the opposite. I had needs, and I had planned for them honestly. On the day the loan cleared, Nolan called instead of sending a celebratory message. He said the final transfer did not repair what he had done. I agreed. He said he had begun telling new employees that Waymark's first launch had depended on debt and unpaid labor the company should have named from the beginning. That did not restore trust either, but it was the kind of accurate sentence trust might someday use as a foundation. When he started to ask whether I could review a new vendor agreement, he stopped himself. We both heard the old habit arrive. This time he let it leave without making me fight it. Peter did not visit. The mediator remained available if he could acknowledge concealment without calling it protection. He sent a birthday card explaining why he had done what any good father would do. I returned it unopened. His absence from my private life was not revenge. It was the consequence of his continuing belief that love gave him authority over my reality. Claire and I had brief mediated calls. She no longer asked me to forgive Peter or rank her against Marisol. Sometimes she described a school office problem. Sometimes I told her about therapy. The conversations were careful and incomplete. That was the access her behavior had earned. Marisol remained Marisol. She attended one rehabilitation milestone because I invited her, missed another because her recovery group needed her, and told me the truth about both. She never asked when I would call her mom. We learned each other in ordinary portions: coffee, a used bookstore, the way both of us checked door locks twice. On my first Saturday in the new house, I invited her for dinner. She asked what to bring. I told her nothing. When the bell rang, my cane was resting within reach against the entry table. Beside it stood the restored photograph from my 6th birthday and the hospital visitor card in its clear sleeve. Through the glass, I saw Marisol waiting on the porch. She had not tried the handle. In one hand, she held a small blue envelope. I opened the door but did not step aside yet. "What's in the envelope?" I asked. "A note saying Saturday works," she said. "I wrote it before you told me to bring nothing." I smiled. "That's impractical. I'm trying new things." She stayed outside. Behind me, the old photograph and the hospital card held two true moments. One from a past I could not recover, one from the night someone waited without assuming she belonged inside. Neither made the decision for me. I was steady on my own feet. The cane was there if I needed it. Marisol held the ordinary blue envelope and waited. I opened the door wider and invited her in.